Welcome to Midwest Sports Net. The NAIA Football Playoff matchups have been announced for the 2022 National Football Championship, and we're going to talk about that tonight. We'll talk about the 16 teams that are in. We'll talk about a couple of teams that didn't quite make it in, and we're also going to talk about the Victory Bowl matchup that is going to take place this week. It's actually going to get a day's head start over the playoffs. So thanks for watching tonight here on Midwest Sports Net. Let's get right into it as we have, there are 16 teams. That means 8 first-round matchups. Excited about all of them, and why not get started with the top team in the country taking on Arizona Christian. Morningside, the Mustangs, they are the champions, the defending champions, 3 times in 4 years champions. They're taking on Arizona Christian. Arizona Christian coming out of the Sooner Athletic Conference, and there has been a little bit of controversy about that. Lots of folks were very surprised that it was not going to be Ottawa, Arizona, that it was in fact Arizona Christian. I do like this pick. It's really something that Arizona Christian made it into the top 20. They had to be there, and really that was the main thing, was getting into the top 20 in the NAIA coaches poll, the final regular season poll. Now, whether you agree with that or not, that's a discussion for another time. The fact is that Arizona Christian made it, and the fact is that Arizona Christian defeated Ottawa, Arizona. So this is the 7th straight win for Arizona Christian to close out the regular season, only the 2nd appearance in the NAIA football playoffs. Arizona Christian is averaging 42 points per game, 42.0 points per game. That is 6th in the NAIA. And that's a pretty good number, so keep that in mind. Tyler Duncan is the 2nd all-time leading rusher in the history of Arizona Christian football. He's the quarterback. He's thrown for 1,308 yards, and he has himself scored 86 points. So he's the 2nd all-time leading scorer in ACU history as well. Total offense, 8,648 yards for his career. Pretty good number. We'll talk about an even bigger number a little bit later on in this matchup between the two schools. But Tyler Duncan has done a great job. He has Aiden Quinn with which to work, who is Arizona Christian's all-time leading rusher as well. 2,768 yards for his career. For Quinn, he's had 3 touchdowns this season, not as much as what you might think he would have. 32 for his career. That leads the Firestorm. He scored 30 points this year as well. So Quinn with him, and then, of course, Nestor Higuera, the great kicker. He is the 2nd all-time leading scorer in ACU history behind Aiden Quinn. Aiden Quinn has 224 points total. Higuera has 223. He scored 78 points this year. Don't forget about Maurice Powell, who has 58 tackles on the year. And Moses Smith, 10.5 sacks this year. That's good enough for 7th in the NAIA. So Arizona Christian can do it with their offense. They can do it with their defense as well. But they're going up against Morningside. And that is the big deal. Morningside, the Mustangs, the number 1 team in the country. They've won 24 consecutive games. They are 10-0 coming into this year. 12th consecutive GPAC championship. I mean, the resume just goes on and on and on. Morningside making its 19th appearance in the NAIA playoffs. Scoring 57.4 points per game. Yes, that is tops in the NAIA. 42 passing touchdowns, tops in the NAIA. The Joe Dolencheck resume continues to be built here. Passing yards per game, 385.3. That's tops in the NAIA. Total offense, 570.5 yards. That's tops in the NAIA. 28 first downs per game. 28 first downs per game. That's tops in the NAIA. And they have been scoring touchdowns 79% of the time they've been in the red zone. Not just scored, but scored a touchdown 79% of the time they've been in the red zone. That's 2nd in the NAIA, only behind Roosevelt. The Lakers, by the way, a very good season, didn't quite make the playoffs. So it is Arizona Christian taking on Morningside. That is the matchup of the 1 and 16. All right, let's move on down here and take a look at the next matchup. The number 2 seed in the playoffs is Grandview. Grandview, I've been told here on the channel that I don't give enough love to Johnny Sullivan. So let me say, Johnny Sullivan, you've led your team very, very well this year. We think highly of you here at Midwest Sports Net. And so I shout out to Johnny Sullivan. So let me go ahead and skip to the Grandview side really quickly. Johnny Sullivan, 2,609 yards passing this year, 237.2 passing yards per game. That is 11th in the NAIA, 22 passing touchdowns, 3rd in the NAIA. He has Allie Scott with him in the backfield, 787 rushing yards and 9 rushing touchdowns this season. And by the way, field goal percent, 93.3, 14 of 15 field goals this year. Grandview is undefeated. Grandview, the number 2 seed, and they're taking on a very tough Carroll team. Now, you want to talk about royalty in the NAIA and playoffs, especially within the last couple of decades. You have to talk about the Carroll Saints. They're the number 15 seed this year, but this is a team that's won 6 national championships within the last 2 decades. In 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2007, and 2010. 6 national championships within just the past 2 decades. And they beat College of Idaho, which was really, in essence, there were a number of de facto playoff games that were taking place this weekend. Carroll and College of Idaho was one of those. This in Caldwell, so College of Idaho hosting this matchup, but it was 21-6 on that cold day. I heard and I read that it was a more of a brutal day in Helena, but it was calm in Caldwell, and the Saints were able to come through. Big day. Jack Perka, the freshman, 1,352 passing yards, 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. But it's been a lot about defense, too, for Carroll. I don't want to forget Duncan Kraft, 855 rushing yards, 8 rushing touchdowns. But Carroll has a great defense, and that's been key in this. Garrett Worden, a redshirt freshman defensive lineman, 10 tackles per game, this season, 6.5 sacks and 4 pass breakups. Also, 2 blocked kicks. So this is going to be a pretty good matchup. I don't think that there is any matchup that you can look at, even, 116, 215, and you look and you say, okay, Morningside, by far the best team in the country. Grandview, you could say a lot for Grandview as well, and maybe even make a statement that they could be the best team in the country, actually have a very good record, undefeated as well. These are the 2 teams that met for the national championship last year. But I don't think you look past Arizona Christian. I don't think you look past Carroll. So that's just the way that is. Shout out to everyone watching tonight. Thank you, by the way, for folks watching this live. If you are watching the replay, thank you. Please like, share the video. Please subscribe to the channel, Midwest Sports Net. Michael, looking for a KCAC team to shine. We'll get to some KCAC teams in just a moment. Hey, Stephen, thanks for watching tonight. And I'd love to talk a little more about Texas Wesleyan, May just a bit. And Jake, thank you for watching tonight. Really appreciate that. So let's move on along to our next matchup, which brings us to Dickinson State and Northwestern. The Blue Hawks started off 0-2, then won 8 straight. This is the 23rd appearance in the NAIA tournament for the Blue Hawks. They are dominant in the North Star, having won now their 8th consecutive North Star Association championship. They are taking on a Northwestern team. These 2 teams have seen each other 4 times previously, 2-2 all time against one another, 1-1 in the playoffs against one another. The Blue Hawks are putting up 35.1 points per game, maybe not as high as some of these other teams in the playoffs, though. 22 interceptions, 19 fumble recoveries. I was telling you about the defense for Carroll and how the Frontier League, really, there's a lot of good defense out there, and you see these teams just slug it out. It's not really a high-scoring affair. Dickinson State, maybe in the same geographical area up there in the northern part of the country, and they do it by defense as well. 22 interceptions, tops in the NAIA. 19 fumble recoveries, number 2 in the NAIA. And they're led by Aaron White, a senior who's passed for nearly 60% completion rate this year, 2,078 passing yards, 16 touchdowns. Alec Lovegren in the backfield with him, 316 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns. And then McCarville and Sickler, more than 600 yards receiving apiece. McCarville with 7 touchdown receptions to his credit. And on the defensive side, Keaton Meshke, 55 tackles. Crew Mathern, 48 tackles. And Dawson McLaughlin, 32 tackles and 7 interceptions. So that's a big part of it. Again, when the team has 22 interceptions on the year, a fantastic year. But this is a defensive team that's going up against a very strong offensive team in Northwestern. Northwestern, another team that started off the year with a loss, just one. Dickinson State had 2 and then won 8 straight. Northwestern had 1 and then won 9 straight. But the one loss, by the way, to Morningside. And, well, everybody lost to Morningside. So 9 straight victories. Northwestern with a tie at the top of the list, 24 appearances in the NAIA playoffs. And the Red Raiders just, they do a fantastic job, putting up 43.8 points per game. That is third in the NAIA. They've only allowed 9.5 points per game. Now, see, when you start talking about these numbers, you look at teams that strong on both sides of the ball. 9.5 points allowed. That's fourth in the NAIA. Northwestern's had 30 rushing touchdowns. We'll get to why that's the case here in just a moment. Only Kansas Wesleyan has had more rushing touchdowns than Northwestern. They're completing their third downs, by the way, at a 55% completion rating on third down. That's tops in the NAIA. They're not penalized very much. That is also good. Northwestern had an issue, though, a little bit earlier in the season when Blake Fryer went down. Starting quarterback, looking to get one more season in. He goes down. Jalen Gramstad comes in. Gramstad, 117 for 166 passing, 1,606 yards passing, 70.5% completion. And Gramstad, you think, okay, this is great. I mean, this guy's lighting it up, 15 passing touchdowns since he came in midway through the season. That's not all. He's been able to do it with his legs as well. The Red Raiders have just been gifted with another quarterback to come in and get the job done. 659 yards rushing. Again, most of this in the second half of the season. 16 rushing touchdowns. So 30 rushing touchdowns over the year, 14 coming from your quarterback, who, by the way, can throw the ball pretty well too. Northwestern, it also has Meyer and McQuinlan, each with 8 rushing touchdowns, each at around 500 yards rushing. So Michael Story, 813 yards receiving. Oh, and Parker Fryer, Blake's brother, on the defensive side, leading the way with 85 tackles, 8.0 tackles for loss, 1 interception, and 2 forced fumbles. So Northwestern, it's going to be a great matchup. And you could be looking at a big, strong defense versus a big, strong offense. I don't know. I think the Red Raiders come to play defense as well. We're not going to pick any of these matchups tonight. I just want to give you what these two teams or what these 16 teams bring to the table. Jake, thank you very much for watching. Man, I appreciate getting to see your name come up there. And Dale, thank you very much for watching tonight at 2. Oh, you know what? That reminds me, there are some other names I didn't drop for Morningside. So let me go back there and put that Morningside logo back up there for a second. Okay. Ryan Cole, one of 9 1,000-yard rushers in the regular season. He had 1,151 yards rushing, averaged 115.1 yards per game. That's 8th in the NAIA. Ryan Cole had himself a game in the season finale against Concordia. And then Austin Johnson and Zach Norton, 2 of the best receivers in all of the NAIA all year long. Austin Johnson, one of 7 receivers in the regular season with more than 1,000 yards receiving. He had 1,284. That was good enough for 142.7 yards receiving per game, best in the NAIA. 16 touchdowns, second in the NAIA. Zach Norton, another one of 7 receivers in all of the NAIA in the regular season. So that means Morningside had not 1, but 2 receivers that had 1,000-plus yards receiving in the regular season. Only 5 other receivers total in all of the NAIA. The other 97 teams had 1,000-yard receivers. Zach Norton, 109.6 yards receiving per game, 1,096 yards receiving total. That's 4th in the NAIA. He had 15 touchdowns. That's 3rd in the NAIA. I didn't want to neglect those other Morningside players too. And this is all, by the way, without even mentioning the defense. We could go on and on and on, but I digress. Let's go on down to the next matchup then. Let's move on along here as we go down to the number 4 seed, the Bethel Wildcats. And this is a team that just seemed to get better as the season went on. And I recognize, Bethel didn't get a lot. They weren't disrespected, I don't think. I think people thought the Wildcats would do well. But you've got teams like Lindsey Wilson. You've got teams like Georgetown. You've got Coach Oliver moving from one place to another. And Bethel, somewhere along the way, looked at like maybe the 3rd team in the Mid-South this year. Not the case. Not the case. Bethel goes 11-0. They won 11 straight games. This is their 6th appearance in the NAIA Football Playoffs, the first since 2018. Bethel, for the program, the first team not only to go undefeated, they've had a team go undefeated before. This is the first one to go undefeated and win 11 games in a season. Bethel won 52-7 in 28 over Kaiser, their opponent. So you have to go back a little ways. That was the only time these two teams have met up. Bethel is averaging 287.7 yards per game passing, 7th in the NAIA. Joaquin Collazo III, better than 3,000 yards passing this season. 3,077 yards passing. He's had 27 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. J.D. Dixon was one of the receivers that we had here on Midwest Sports Net as one of the top 5 receivers coming into this year. Hey, he had 890 receiving yards, 10 receiving touchdowns on the season. I don't think he disappointed at all. And how about the Wildcats also on defense? Jalen Sanders, 58 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. The Wildcats are solid all the way around. Again, 11-0, taking on a Kaiser team that was undefeated in the NAIA. 7-3 was the record. But you take on a Division I FCS opponent. You take on a Division II opponent, Mississippi College. You take on another Division II opponent in Valdosta State, who, by the way, were the defending runners-up in Division II last season. Kaiser played a schedule. I mean, it was a brutal schedule. And if you look at it and you go 7-3, it's a team that had 3 losses. I don't know about that. None of the losses were against NAIA programs. Kaiser did extremely well. And once they got past that portion of the schedule, won 6 straight. They're making their 4th appearance in the NAIA playoffs. Kaiser, this is one of those numbers that gets hidden. I'm going to drop this one for you. A team number for Kaiser, 33.8 kickoff return yards. That was the average. That was best in the NAIA. So what does that mean? Well, it means that sometimes some of your other players aren't going to get as much or as a big a number statistically, because Kaiser is starting so far toward the middle of the field because of the kickoff return yardage. 33.8 yards per kickoff return. That's big. That's really big. Then, of course, you give the ball to someone like Marquise Burgess, who had 1,166 yards rushing, one of 9 players in the NAIA this season with at least 1,000 yards rushing, averaged 116.6 yards per game. That was 5th in the NAIA. He had 12 rushing touchdowns. Shea Spencer, by the way, with 1,744 yards passing, 13 passing touchdowns. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Marcus Philord, 50 tackles. That was 2nd on the team. Had 4 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries. Jalen Willis had 82 tackles. He led the team. 6.5 tackles for loss there. So a big, strong team. Burgess, a strong running back. And then, of course, Willis and Philord on defense. You have all the makings of a really good matchup between these two programs. And this one, again, you just keep looking down the list and go, man, these are some really, really solid matchups all the way through. It would be tough to imagine any blowouts coming up on Saturday. Definitely not between these two. Now, again, only matchup in the past between the two. Bethel won 52-7. That was 4 years ago. There might be 59 points scored in this game, but there's no reason to think that this is in any way at all going to be a blowout. To the comment section, I'll tell you what, Terry and Mike, we will get to that comment in just a moment because we do want to address that a little bit later on. In the meantime, we're going to continue on through the teams that did get in, and the next one up has the number 5 seed in the tournament, Indiana Wesleyan, taking on Avila. Avila, 10-1 on the year, has won 7 straight games. This is the first playoff appearance for the Avila Eagles. Avila, formerly in the Hart Conference, moves over to the KCAC. This is the 2nd conference championship in 3 years for Coach Benavidez's team. I really enjoy watching the Eagles and following them. It could have gone a number of ways in the KCAC. Avila wins, gets the playoff automatic bid because of the 3-way tie. Each team at the top, Avila, Bethel, Southwestern, each with only 1 loss in conference play. Avila defeated Bethel. Bethel defeated Southwestern. Remember that. And then Southwestern defeated Avila. Avila won by the widest margin. It was 14 points. And so Avila got the tiebreaker. And because all 3 were in the top 20, remember that as well. Because all 3 were in the top 20, Avila did get the tiebreaker. Led by Eli Williams, 1,751 yards passing, 9 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Oh, but wait, there's more. He had 660 yards rushing too, and 10 more rushing touchdowns. Eli Williams with 29 touchdowns on the season. Malik Nesbitt, one of the players that we felt like was going to be strong coming into this season, 973 yards rushing, 13 rushing touchdowns. And Andrew Williams on offense, 608 yards receiving, 9 of those touchdown catches from Eli Williams. To Indiana Wesleyan, they're making their second playoff appearance, but realistically, it's their first, because last year had the playoff appearance getting ready to go play Kansas Wesleyan, self-reported an ineligible player. They were taken out of the playoffs, removed. I believe that went against them. I believe it counted as an 0-1. So it says their second appearance in the playoffs. This is another team that can get by and is strong on both sides of the ball. 21 interceptions that they've had on the year, and that is second in the NAIA. We've already talked about the interceptions a little bit earlier. Xavier Stokes, 1,932 yards passing, 23 passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Stokes delivers for Indiana Wesleyan, and he has some help in the backfield. Darian Williams with 805 yards rushing, 12 touchdowns on the ground. He had a big week a couple of weeks ago. He was one of our top 5 here on Midwest Sports Net. Jaquez Carter, 723 yards receiving, 9 touchdown catches. And then on the defensive side, Donovan Shelton with 7 interceptions and 1 fumble recovery and a pass breakup as well. He does a good job on his side, getting those turnovers and getting it back in the hands of Stokes and company. And then Isaac Abayo, 15.5 tackles for loss and 9 sacks on the season. Absolutely huge number. Indiana Wesleyan was one of 2 teams that I thought would be teams that were just, they'd find a way to come in. You didn't think about them very much. They just sneak up on people. We're not picked as one of the top teams in the conference preseason poll. As a matter of fact, in the Mid-States Football Association, the Mid-East Division, Indiana Wesleyan was picked 3rd behind both Concordia and Marion. Marion, who, by the way, made the playoffs. Indiana Wesleyan beats both of those teams and finds a way to get in and get the automatic bid. Next up is Southwestern. Southwestern, 9-1, making its 6th appearance in the NAIA Football Playoff, taking on Benedictine, making its 15th appearance in the NAIA Football Playoff tournament. By the way, Benedictine hadn't been in since 2018, and that was the year in which the Ravens made a run to the runner-up spot. The national runners-up in 2018 lost to Morningside 35-28. That was an incredible game back then. That was in 2018. Southwestern, let's get to them first. In what was, in essence, a playoff game on Saturday, Southwestern at home defeated Kansas Wesleyan 26-20 to clinch the playoff spot, or what we found out later was clinching the playoff spot. One of 3 teams at the top of the KCAC in the standings, had only 1 loss, 9-1 on the year. Southwestern lost to Avila, their only loss of the season. Southwestern trailed Kansas Wesleyan, though, 20-7 at halftime, outscored the Coyotes 19-0 in the second half, and that's what it took to get in. Brad Cagle was back in as quarterback in the final game. He threw for 193 yards and a touchdown. Samara Hunter, 149 yards in that game and 1 touchdown. Keyshawn Jones had a rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown. Big game for Southwestern. The Mound Builders come into this playoff as the number 11 seed. Benedictine, the number 6 seed. 10-1 on the year, 9 straight wins. It is the 15th playoff appearance. We mentioned that. It's the 18th meeting, though, between these 2 schools. Benedictine is 1-12. Southwestern has 1-5. Benedictine scoring 40.5 points per game. That's good enough for 8th in the NAI. But also the defense, too. 20 interceptions, good enough for 3rd in the NAI. Garrett Kettle is getting it done, and he has more than 3,000 yards of total offense. He's passed for 2,696 yards per game. Wow, that would be really impressive, by the way. 2,696 for the season, 27 passing touchdowns, thrown 9 interceptions too. But 414 yards rushing, 9 more touchdowns on the ground. Kettle with more than 3,000 yards of total offense and responsible for 36 touchdowns on the year. Rayshawn Mills, another 565 yards rushing, 11 touchdowns. Jacob Gathright, another one of those players, only 7 that crossed the 1,000-yard mark in receiving yards. He was one of them, 8 touchdowns. And Dwayne Lacey and Tyler Wilson, each with 6.5 sacks on that Ravens defense. So Southwestern, Benedictine, this one could be really pretty interesting. A couple of teams from Kansas playing one another from two different conferences. All right, we move on down here. Looking at the next matchup, and that is the number 7 seed Marion and the number 10 seed St. Xavier. This is a matchup of two teams that have a national championship to their resume. Pretty nice there. Marion has won 4 straight. They're the number 7 seed. They're 8-1 right now, won 4 straight. This is their 11th appearance in the playoffs. They were the national champions in 2012 and in 2015, putting up 41 points per game. Good enough for 7th in the NAIA. Allowing only 7.9 points per game. That is at the top of the NAIA this year. So Marion has been one of those teams for a while. I think in recent years has been known for what it can do, not only on the defensive side of the ball, but how well it runs the ball. The defensive side of the ball, definitely strong again, but they've been able to throw the ball pretty well this year also. Zach Bundalo, 2,007 yards passing, 18 passing touchdowns, and he found Ben Stevens very often. 958 yards receiving, 8 receiving touchdowns. Steven also had a punt return for a touchdown this year. Dion Pettiford on the defensive side, 11 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries. The Knights are coming in very, very strong right now. Again, having one of the 4 straight, only loss of the year for the Knights against Indiana Wesleyan, who went ahead and won the Mideast there. The Knights are taking on St. Xavier, 9-2. Another one of those teams that you might have looked at the start of the season when they started 0-2 and went, oh man, I don't know if St. Xavier is going to do this or not. They won the next 9 ball games after that. 9-2 overall, having won 9 straight. 15th appearance in the NAIA Football Playoffs. They won the 2011 National Championship. It's the 15th meeting between St. Xavier and Marion. St. Xavier 10-4 overall in the previous 14 meetings. Another game that was, in essence, a de facto playoff game on Saturday as St. Xavier beat St. Francis 24-21 to win the Mid-States Midwest Division. St. Xavier has been able to put points on the board with its offense, but also with its defense. Second in the NAIA in 5 defensive touchdowns this year. The offense is led by Stuart Ross, 2,269 yards passing, 16 touchdowns. He finds Justin Pringle often, 849 receiving yards. 10 of those 16 touchdowns have gone to Pringle. And by the way, Pringle also had a 95-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. So he had 11 for the year. On the defensive side, this is where it could get fun. This is one of those matchups that if the over-under, I would probably put somewhere around 44, and then I might take the under because you could see a lot of defense between these two. St. Xavier led by Joey Markusovich with 91 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 2 interceptions, and a fumble recovery. So not only does he get the job done in wrapping up, but he also finds a way to get the ball back to his side. And Kevin Countryman, 6 more interceptions, 2 of those, by the way, for pick 6. So St. Xavier and Marion could be a good defensive matchup. The final matchup of the season is not that. There it is. Reinhardt and Lindsey Wilson. Reinhardt, 8-1 on the year, having won 7 consecutive games. It's the 8th appearance in the NAIA National Football Tournament, and they were runners-up back in 2017, the national runners-up. Reinhardt, 258.1 rushing yards per game. That is second in the NAIA behind only Friends, and, of course, Terry Harrison taking that option to Friends this year. Watch for the Falcons. Watch for the Falcons. This could be a team that comes along within 2 years, I want to say for sure. Maybe next year. You just never know. And they're taking on this, the Eagles, led by Devin Collins. His rushing attack, 961 yards rushing, 17 rushing touchdowns. A good defensive effort by the Eagles as well. Kenneth Lowry with 55 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 6.5 of those were sacks. And Tyler Hollum with 1 interception, but 16 pass breakups. So wherever Hollum is not where Lindsey Wilson's going to want to throw the ball. Whoever winds up going in as the quarterback for Lindsey Wilson. Let's talk about the Blue Raiders then, 9-1 on the year. A loss to Bethel. late in the season. The only loss of the season was to the Wildcats, then won the last two, including a big victory over Georgetown. That was a huge win. And again, another de facto playoff game. That really was almost a situation of win and get in. You really felt like Lindsey Wilson was in the top 10 all year long. But if Georgetown had won, I think a case could have been made for the Tigers. It was a 27-13 victory. Ethan Cash was the quarterback for Lindsey Wilson this past Saturday, led the way in this matchup. Lindsey Wilson, 29.1 kickoff return yards per kickoff return per average, each one. And this goes back up there as we were talking about a little bit earlier. When you get that far down the field, all ready to get started, you put your offense in a very good position. That was second in the NAI. Also on defense, though, Lindsey Wilson, 47 sacks. That is tops in the NAI, giving up only 193.3 yards per game. Only 193.3 yards per game for the whole season for the Lindsey Wilson defense. That is tops in the NAI. The opponents were able to score only 9.1 points per game. That was third in the NAI. I mentioned Ethan Cash. Ethan Cash and Will McDonald both led the way at different times over the course of the season for the Blue Raiders. Kobe Belcher with 729 yards rushing, 4 touchdowns. And on the defensive side of the ball, 5.5 of those 47 sacks came at the hands of Luke Bowman. He led the team with 70 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, 1 fumble recovery, and 8 pass breakups. So that's kind of the look at the playoff situation as it is. And I know that most everyone knows these matchups by now, and we've talked about a few things, and you probably watched the selection show and how it all went down. So I just wanted to talk about a couple of teams that didn't make it in. So let's go first with one of our comments right here. I promised that I would get this on. Terry and Mike. Texas Wesleyan beat Arizona Christian 48-21 and is averaging 45.2 points per game. You really need to look into who does the voting from the SAC to figure out why ACU would go over Texas Wesleyan. Okay, so let's leave that up there for just a moment. Let's talk about what all is involved in this. There's more than one thing involved in why Texas Wesleyan did not go. First, Texas Wesleyan was not in the top 20, made its way to the top 25 at the end of the season and just barely. Now, why? That is the better question. Why was Texas Wesleyan not in the top 25 a little bit later on? Lost the games early on and then made a run later in the season. Got a lot of wins later in the season, had only 2 losses on the season. Texas Wesleyan had a resume, and I've always been under the idea or the thought process that if you're going to lose games, lose them early on and be strong at the end. Well, Texas Wesleyan lost them early on. They never made it back into the top 25 until later, and especially not in the top 20. And the NAI rules are, and however you think about the rules is up to you, but the rules are that you have to be in the top 20. There have been a number of instances where teams have had fantastic seasons but not been in the top 20. I recall one, and it wasn't that long ago, that Langston won its conference. This is back when it was in the CSFL. Won its conference, but was in the rankings, not ratings, by the way. That video is on the way very soon. In the rankings, they're not ratings, they're rankings. In the rankings as number 21, but they weren't in the top 20, and so they didn't make the playoffs. Won the conference, won it outright, but we're not in the top 20. Well, that's the issue here. So Texas Wesleyan, number 1, was not in the top 20, and that was the big thing that kept the Rams out. The other thing, Arizona Christian, when it came down to it, Arizona Christian beat Ottawa of Arizona. Now, there was a 3-way tie at the top, okay? And with that 3-way tie at the top, what we had been looking at here on Midwest Sports Net was to see who those 3 teams played next down the rankings. And up until the last week of the season, the team that was right below them was Langston. But Langston kept losing. And so now it became an issue of who do they play with Southwestern Assemblies of God and Louisiana Christian, who, by the way, is just disrupting people left and right lately in the Sooner Athletic Conference. And it came down to, though, Arizona Christian and Ottawa were the only 2 that were in the top 20. Of those 2, what was the record head-to-head? Arizona Christian defeated Ottawa, Arizona. So that's why they went on. So that's the question. So it's not who does the voting from the SAC, I don't believe. I believe it's the national voting poll or pool of voters, and they are ranking, not rating, ranking these teams according to what they see. They didn't give Texas Wesleyan the benefit of the doubt. So there's that. I know there are a lot of folks that's 2A of the teams. There were 3 teams that caused some consternation as to why they didn't make the playoffs. That was 2A. 2B was St. Thomas, and St. Thomas had a very good resume. I know they beat St. Xavier. It wasn't going to happen. Also, they didn't win the Sun, needed to win the Sun. So automatic bid, they were a little bit too far down in the rankings. Now, again, if they'd been higher up, maybe, but they were too far down in the rankings, even if they were in the top 20. So there was that one. So that's 2A and 2B. The top team that has probably the biggest gripe as to why it didn't make the playoffs is Bethel. And I don't think there's any question about that. So a couple of people have already been talking about KCAC in the chat. So let's talk about Bethel for a moment. And why should Bethel have made it? Well, there were 3 teams at the top of the KCAC standings. Each team had only one loss. Avila defeated Bethel. Bethel defeated Southwestern. Southwestern defeated Avila. Avila won the tiebreaker to get the conference bid. So they're in. So that's the automatic bid goes to Avila, which leaves Bethel and Southwestern. Now, if you're a Southwestern fan, you're not going to like what I have to say. Bethel beat Southwestern. When it came down to it, after the automatic bid was given, Bethel and Southwestern are all that were left. Bethel defeated Southwestern head-to-head. Bethel, in my humble opinion, should have received the automatic bid. The committee didn't think so, and that's up to the committee to make that decision. But as far as I was concerned there, and besides that, Bethel went in strong. Last year it was the same thing. 3 teams at the top of the KCAC. Each team lost only one. They lost to each other in a little round robin there, and Bethel was on the outside looking in. Now, Bethel lost its final game of the season to Division II West Texas A&M out in Canyon, Texas last year. If they had gone into the playoffs, they would have gone in limping anyway, backing in with a loss. It wouldn't have counted against their conference schedule, but it still was a loss. There was no such loss this year. So for the second season in a row, Bethel has been able to grab a share of a conference championship and be on the outside looking in at the playoffs. So it's a little sad how it works out, but that is the way it is. So there we go. All right. Last graphic. How about that one? Victory Bowl. The Victory Bowl on Friday night. Not on Saturday. It's going to be on Friday this year in Waxahachie, Texas, and we will be there. Midwest Sports Saturday from Waxahachie. Midwest Sports Saturday. We've done shows on Thursday, and we've done shows on Sunday before. We've never done one on a Friday night, but we're going to this coming week. So we'll be in Waxahachie for the Victory Bowl as Olivet Nazarene is taking on Southwestern Assemblies of God. Olivet Nazarene 6-4 on the year, won 2 straight, won the first Victory Bowl ever back in 1997, has won 4 more since then in 04, 05, 2018, and 2019. Olivet Nazarene led by Cameron Crouch with 1,866 yards passing, 21 touchdowns, 6 INTs. He also has 323 yards rushing and 7 more touchdowns. Evan Leake with 916-yard rushing and 6 touchdowns. Brian Jenkins, 888 yards receiving and 12 touchdowns. Josh Meisers leading the way on the defense with 60 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks. Southwestern Assemblies of God, 7-3. They've won 5 straight coming in and won last year's Victory Bowl big-time win over Sterling last year. Keaton Dudick is going to headline this for the Lions. 1,477 yards rushing, averaging 147.7 yards per game. A monstrous season. Started out slow. He really did. But since then, he's had 15 rushing touchdowns, 2 300-plus yard rushing games, 306 against Lyon, 302 against Texas College. This is a big-time matchup right here. Can the Olivet Nazarene defense stop Dudick? Briley Green passing for 1,951 yards for the Lions and 17 touchdowns. Of those, Paul Odidi has received 6 touchdowns, and he's had 700 yards receiving even on. And Isaac Gowdy on the defensive side, 5 interceptions, 8 pass breakups. Excuse me. we are going to be at the Victory Bowl. Midwest Sports Saturday. We'll be there for that. So that is this coming week. I'm excited about that. Could be a lot of fun. Should be a lot of fun. That is down in Waxahachie, Texas. Be sure and watch that too on the Sagu Sports Network, as Champion Sports Network, I believe, is going to be overseeing this. If you haven't seen a Southwestern Assemblies of God, if you haven't seen a Sagu Sports Net broadcast, you need to, because they are the best in the NAI, and I don't think it's even close. They're the best in the NAI in their broadcasts, so you need to get to watch this one. This is a Friday night matchup. If you don't have a high school team in the playoffs that you're really, really rooting on, sit around, watch the Sagu and Olivet Nazarene game on the Sagu Sports Net. You can see it on the YouTube channel, and then get ready for 8 games of NAIA football as the playoffs get underway this weekend. It's going to be a lot of fun. I want to say thanks to you all for watching tonight. Now, normally on Monday nights, and we're live still here, so I mean we've gone longer than we normally do on a Monday night. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for commenting. Let me know. Hey, listen, please take the time, like the video, subscribe to the channel. It really does help. We have our Patreon page in the links or in the description, so you may want to be a part there and help support the channel. We would appreciate that. It's something that we enjoy doing here, and I like it a lot. And I enjoy getting to speak with some of you all, as I get to do on a regular basis. So that's a lot of fun too. But top 5 performances, we should be able to get that tomorrow. Later on in the week, we will get to visit with Coach Heyman from Olivet Nazarene. He's going to be with me on the summit. So that is, I believe, a Wednesday video there. So be watching for that. We also will get to visit with someone who had a very special NAIA career. I'll keep that a secret for right now, but we'll get that out there just a little bit later. And then I also get to visit with a D2 volleyball athlete that made a big run in a conference tournament this week also. So Midwest Sports Net, I mean, this is the place to be for Division II and for NAIA sports all the way around. Football, volleyball, we're heading into basketball season, you name it, we are right here. I appreciate, again, everyone watching tonight. Thanks again for going over this first round with us here as we look at these 8 matchups. And then, of course, the Victory Bowl. We'll talk about more then. Please subscribe to the channel. Please like the video. Please share the video. God bless you all. Have a great, great night. Again, thanks for watching.